at a public lecture by the former CBN governor, Mr. Charles Chukwuma Soludo. Why? Well, because 50 years after Nigeria fought a bloody civil war to prevent secession by the breakaway Republic of Biafra, there is now renewed agitation for the state by the group called the Indigenous People of Biafra, IPOB, led by Nnamdi Kanu. He was arrested and charged with treason as a result of his campaign, which included a call for donations so his group can buy guns and bullets to, as he put it, fight Nigeria. And he was held for quite a while, but he is now out on bail. And a little bit later in the program, we will hear from him directly. But since his release, tension has escalated following a successful call by his group for a sit-down-at-home campaign on the 50th anniversary of the declaration of Biafra. A coalition of youth groups from northern Nigeria have reacted to these events by giving an ultimatum to Igbos to vacate northern Nigeria by October and return to the east to, as they put it, actualize Biafra. That call has been widely condemned, with many recommending that the leaders of the group should be arrested and charged with incitement. Now, disturbed by the impact of all of this on the nation, the acting president, Professor Yomi Oshibanjo, has held several meetings with leaders across the country to douse tension. On the call today, we ask, why does Biafra continue to resonate half a century after the Civil War? And what, if any, link is there between the war and the current agitation? We examine that agitation and see whether it is a drive for geographical independence or more a symbolic manifestation of the need for self-determination within a loose federation. We will also try and see if we can reach a resolution here in the studio on what way Nigeria should go. Now, to join me in having this conversation, I'm very blessed to have with me in the studio Professor Chide Odinkalu, who is the President General of the Unity Schools Association, former students of the Unity Association. So welcome, sir, to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Next to him is Mr. Celestine Akpogbara, I'm so sorry. Akpogbara, who is an environmentalist and also an Ogboni activist. Thank you, sir, for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I am also joined by Mr. Odia Ofemun, who is a writer and former private secretary to Chief Obafemi Awolowo. Last but not least is Dr. Jibrin Ibrahim, who is the senior fellow at the Center for Democracy and Development. I'm also joined by a distinguished audience, and we will be inviting them to take part in the discussions as we go along. Let me start with you, Mr. Ofemun, by asking, why does Biafra resonate 50 years after Nigeria fought a civil war?
Because Nigeria became independent and could not design a just system of sharing the loot of freedom. And in the course of trying to settle it, we got it all wrong. It is important that in discussing Biafra, we remember that between 1958 and 1960, there were only 3 political parties that could take government. But none of them could take government on the strength of just what they had. They had to form a coalition. The best coalition in Nigeria was supposed to be between the NCNC, the Action Group, the NEPU, the UMBC.
Now, for the benefit of our audience, who you know, because Nigeria there's no history. They don't teach history in school, so you need to explain
yes,
who these parties are.
Exactly. NCNC, the National Council, the National Council for Nigeria and the Cameroons.
Yes.
The Action Group.
Right. And these were regional parties?
These were the regional parties.
Okay.
Well, they were supposed to be the national parties, but because they were all based in the regions, they tried only from their regions to reach out to the rest of the country. Even when they attempted to move beyond their regions, they were hemmed in by the regionalization that had already taken place. And so you needed for the northern, the NPC in the north, the NCNC in the east, and the Action Group in the west to form a proper coalition. No proper coalition could be formed because there were too many disagreements, and this was the basis of the disagreement. The NCNC was told that if a proper coalition was formed between it, the Action Group, and the other political parties, there would be too much tension between Easterners and Westerners because they had too many educated people to take over the jobs that were being vacated by the exiting colonials.
Okay, now I don't want to interrupt the history lesson because, you know, we could do with it. Unfortunately, we don't have too much time. But the question is this. I can see why that might have led to the problems which then led to the Civil War. My question, though, is that the Civil War was fought and we had some sort of agreement on how to move forward. And yet here we are 50 years on. We are still talking about it, and some people are saying we still want Biafra. And my question is why?
Just give me a minute. When I have explained it, you will see that the injustice with which we started took us into the Civil War, and we came out of the Civil War with that injustice still very present. It was after the sharing of the loot of independence was badly done. The jobs went to the east, but the north took over the Kanji Dam, the railway extensions, the military installations, the iron and steel industry. It was at that point in 1964 that an election took place, and the president of the Republic, Nnamdi Azikiwe, refused to call the prime minister to form a government. That was when the first military intervention in Nigeria took place, because the prime minister ordered the military to put the president in what we will agree today was a custody.
Okay, let me bring in Professor Chidi Odinkalu. What he seems to be saying is that the foundation was wrong. Does that resonate? Do you accept that? Or do you see it slightly differently?
Look, you can negotiate your foundations however you want. I start from the basis that no country is a fact of nature. Every country is built. That means you have to work with some foundations. Some foundations are stronger than others. Some foundations are given. And you can look at a lot of African countries. I'll give you one example. Tanzania. Okay? Now, Tanzania is a fusion of two territories. So that's why it's called United Republic of Tanzania. Because you've got Tanganyika and you have Zanzibar. And actually Zanzibar is also two territories, two islands. And what happened? There was one person, Julius Nyerere. And Tanzania, by the way, has got as much pluralism to some extent as Nigeria. Tens of ethnicities and tribes. Muslims make over 40% of Tanzania. Julius Nyerere, as a Catholic, was actually a minority in Tanzania. But he did what? He tried to build a country. He tried to forge a country. And now you look at the Great Lakes of Africa, and you see Kenya. In Kenya, the language is what? Majimbo. Majimbo is what? Carve up the entire place. Break up the country. You look at Burundi. You look at Rwanda. You look at DRC. You go to Eritrea. You go to Ethiopia. All around Tanzania. Tanzania is an oasis of stability. Why? Because there was one person who was prepared to build a country out of difficult foundations. And what's the point I'm trying to make? I don't think our foundations, no matter how flawed, are reason enough for where we are. We've got to take responsibility. We've produced, forgive my expression, crap leadership.
Crap leadership, Dr. Ibrahim, explains why we are here still talking about parts of Nigeria that want to go at it alone. What do you think?
I think it is indeed true that we've had a leadership that has not done the things they were supposed to do to build a sense of belonging. And if Biafra remains on the table, it is precisely because there is a lot of dissatisfaction with what has happened in the recent past. But it's also because there has been very effective mobilization to keep the idea of Biafra alive. Feelings of marginalization exist for objective reasons, but they also exist because they've been constructed. And what has happened is that at one plane you have the failure of construction of the nation, and on the other side, success in terms of building narratives to divide the nation. And I think the challenge in such situations is always to move towards narrative that bring people together. I think the fact that Nigeria has had competitive politics, there has been also politics of exclusion, is the core historical point being made. So what is the remedy for that?
Before we get to remedy, I'm always fascinated, Mr. Celestine, when Nigerians sit down and we talk about some of the sort of really critical issues that face us as a nation. Sometimes you would think that we are actually not talking about ourselves, as if these people, this leadership, are people who sort of are aliens that jump into our middle and make things happen. I mean, as someone who sort of represents a minority group, in fact, you're not considered, one of the 3 top tribes in Nigeria. What is your view regarding, first, the agitation for independence for Biafra, but perhaps, the wider agitation that we see among groups that feel marginalized within this country?
Well, I think that Nigeria has been very unfortunate to have leaderships that does not think about the people. Leadership that does not have any vision on where the country is moving to. Leadership that are so myopic, they think about their family, and you can see that in the state creation and the local government. My girlfriend is okay, take one local government. You have take one state. You just give. Okay, my wife is from Asaba. Okay, one state. You are from the 40 local government. That kind of thing. So you have that they are merely ad hoc. People don't sit down to look at the ingredients. This soup we are cooking. So you just come, you throw one bag of salt inside. You come, you throw pepper inside. You won't have a good soup. So we've had people that merely moving like after the First Republic, of course. If you look at Awolowo and Nnamdi Azikiwe and Tafawa Balewa, they are different set of people. But after then, this country, and Chido Numa wrote, we are all Biafra. I think that he's right, that we are all Biafra, because what is happening there is what is happening everywhere. In fact, even the so-called majority, I call them so-called because they are even suffering more than those of us. You say class thing. Whether Jonathan was from Niger Delta, the Niger Delta, I didn't see any one borehole in Niger Delta. Okay. So it's not about minority or majority. It's a class thing.
Okay, I want to see if I can drill down to specifics. So we've sort of talked generally about foundation. We've said leadership. We've said we've sort of been unlucky in the kind of people without a vision and all that. But if we're going to be kind of quite specific, because we're here because we want to talk and see whether we can understand the issue with a view to saying, okay, maybe this is the right solution. What did Nigeria do wrong?
We refuse to share the goodness of independence properly. There were just ways of sharing. The fact that our people quarreled about sharing is a normal and proper thing. We do need to determine what is due to every citizen. And because we did not face it squarely, we allowed things to go in the wrong way. The story I began with ended in 1964. As I said, that was the first military intervention in Nigeria's history. The reason that took place was because the NCNC, and therefore the East, suddenly realized that their coalition partner took over the ground. While they took over all the jobs, the ground was taken over by the senior partner and they had nothing. It was when the iron and steel industry that was supposed to go to Onitsha did not go there, and they saw that all the military installations and iron and steel industry, everything was in the north, that they began that process of active revolt against the coalition that was formed. For those who know Nigeria's history, that was when Ojukwu, that same day, Ojukwu went to Gowon, went to Ejo, went to Banjo, and said, let's carry out a coup. None of them agreed. But that was where the problem began. The refusal to develop a just system of sharing. A just system of sharing is something that every country needs to design. Our leaders were not as bad as it looked. They were also outsmarted by circumstance. Circumstance in the sense that once people began to talk about not getting enough, they also started importing fictions into the narration of their own history. So that you start...
importing fiction. You have
when
to be
I say
specific.
fiction,
yes.
Fiction in the sense that things that never happened are brought into the center to prove hatred of one people for another. Many Nigerians talk as if they hate themselves so much they can not even sit down to eat. But when you look at the stories they tell, they are usually always wrong. Some of them never happened.
Professor Chidi, I really want to bring you here because you gave us an example of Tanzania, and I know in the nature of your work is such that actually you've sort of experienced and sat in different places all over Africa where issues of ethnicity, identity come to the fore. So when you hear someone like Mr. Ofemun talk, who in many ways was a witness because he was a private secretary to Chief Awolowo, it sounds almost as if there's an inevitability to where we are today. What is your view?
Inevitability in what sense? Well, if you keep making the wrong calls, you're going to end up in a ditch. It's that simple. So in that sense of, the narrow logic of inevitability of a ditch, from a succession of wrong decisions, absolutely. But I don't think there is an inevitability as to where we are, and we always had a choice to course correct. As I listen to my Egmo here, you keep hearing the word sharing. Now, Nigeria wasn't founded on sharing to begin with. That's the first thing. At independence, indeed, if you go back to 1957, the Lancaster House Conference, the Willink Commission, the fears of the minorities, the idea was to foster production. Now, the sharing began in 1968, during the war, when Gowon got a body of civil servants to advise him, and they altered the formula on the basis of which we were federated, from production to sharing. That is why we are here today, that we have not tried to build a political economy that fosters productivity and production, and therefore governors don't see the human beings in their respective states as assets. Every person is deployed into a politics of trying to grab from the federal government further allocation. And so at the end of the day, there isn't much of a difference in my school of thought between the Northeast and the Southeast. The only difference is you probably have more education in the Southeast than in the Northeast. But whether you're looking at Boko Haram or you're looking at Biafra, it is a narrative of exclusion. Exclusion from a political economy based on elite sharing, not on production.
And if that is the case, Dr. Ibrahim, why is it that one section, in your view, sees this problem and decides we want to go at it alone again for the second time, and you don't hear much, from other marginalized sections of Nigeria about wanting to break the union?
Well, I think it may not be accurate, as Chidi just said, that it's only one section trying to go it alone. He mentioned the case of the Boko Haram insurgency, where they actually formally declared secession. from Nigeria.
And so that's really an attempt also to leave Nigeria from your point of view, yes.
Yeah, in 1966, the Niger Delta People's Republic also declared secession from Nigeria. And it's quite interesting when you look at our political history that all the traditional leaders we have had in our political system, from Awolowo through Ahmadu Bello to Michael Okpara, have all at one point or the other made the call for secession. I think at the core of our problem is really the question of democracy. The crisis of 1964 that Odia spoke about wasn't a crisis of sharing. It was a crisis of power. There was an election, and there was a lot of friction about a level playing ground for the election. And in particular, some of the political parties felt that it was an elaborate rigging machine. And that feeling that that election is not going to settle the question of power democratically was what generated the crisis of 1964, which was the refusal of the then President Azikiwe to accept the election results. And I think it's important to look at what were the factors that led to the crisis of 1964, because it's very important in the subsequent narrative. The first element was the crisis over the 1962 census, which was repeated, and again there was a lot of dissatisfaction with the results. There was a crisis over the electoral system itself. Don't forget the Electoral Act that was subsisting at that time made a provision for all candidates to personally submit their nomination forms to the officer in charge in the Ministry of Interior. And in the North, which was the main bone of contention, because both the NCNC and the Action Group were trying to mobilize northern minorities, what the ruling party in the North did was to deny minority parties and opposition parties in the North the right to contest in the elections. Okay. And 1/3 of the seats in the 1964 elections were declared because they refused to allow the other candidates to contest.
And I'm going to have to stop you there because I'm going to have to take a short break. Stay with us. We are talking Biafra and nation building on The Core, coming to you live from Channels Television Studios. When you say you want to be free, what does that mean in practical terms?
What I mean is a total freedom. We are Biafrans. We've never been Nigeria, and we can never be. We have been marginalized. We are Biafrans. We've never been one. We don't eat the same food. We don't have the same culture. We are not the same. 1914, British government came here and forced us to this unholy marriage that has refused to work. Today, all these people that you're seeing here are saying no to that. No restructuring, nothing except total freedom.
Why you see tears on my eyes that the pains I've been passing through right from the day my father told me about where I come from. Before Nandi Kalu, be my own master, come to lecture me more than what my father did. And that's why I am here. We want a freedom. And if they refuse, what my master decides is what we are standing for. That's referendum. There's nothing else than that.
And since 1914 to date, we've not had any autochthonous, meaning we've not had any homegrown process in which people are involved in the creation of their constitution. And that's our problem. So to just go to restructuring without asking some key questions, I think is fundamentally flawed. Nigeria's sovereignty is not sacrosanct. Nigeria's sovereignty is sacrosanct for those people who are eyeing 2019. They will do this, deceive us, go to 2019, pretend that restructure is the issue. They are now climbing on the bandwagon of popularism. It is not in the interest of Nigerians to listen to what I call the conspiracy of the elite. The conspiracy of the elite is to be found in either the APC or the PDP or whatever new party emerges for 2019. We need to look inwards and determine how best we can grow our country. And I think we can do so by asking the real questions. And it is not for nothing that Nnamdi Kanu has sprung up from nowhere. Let us be honest. It is not for nothing. Here's a guy who no one knew suddenly springs up. Why? Because the politicians have created the space. Politicians are not on the ground. They sit in Abuja and talk, and people can relate to their own ethnicities or subnational groups. So now Nnamdi Kanu sees there's an opportunity to take over the southeast. He goes there, he finds there's marginalization, unhappiness, poverty, and he jumps in. I've nothing against Nnamdi Kanu, except that he must do what he's doing according to the Nigerian law.
If you have a truly federal, fairer, restructured Federal Republic of Nigeria, that the agitation for Biafra might win. That is the counter-narrative. But he also argues forcefully about the absence of leadership in Igbo land to push for this counter-narrative. Today he talks about the leadership failures, and he took on very forcefully some of our sons who, at least in the last government, he accused of taking the slots belonging to the Igbos. And what they achieved with it was basically to turn the Bellians to develop their own villages and abandon the entire Igbo land, as it were. And so this vacuum, according to him, that there is nobody, there is no leadership that actually agitates for the larger Igbos within the same, agitating for this fairer, neo-Nigerian, whatever, what I might call the Neo-Zikism. In other words, within the context of that, Neo-Zikism will represent what Azikiwe lived and canvassed for. They negotiated for a new constitution, for constitutions of Nigeria. They went through a series of constitutional conferences, and Zik died a federalist.
Welcome back. We are talking Biafra and nation building. And remember, if you want to be part of this conversation, you can tweet your questions and comments, and we will do our very best to make sure that we share what you say. Now, I was out, as you saw in some of those Vox Pops in Umuahia, and I spoke to young men that I found in front of Nnamdi Kanu's house, and all of them were talking about leadership. And we saw some of those videos, Mr. Chukwuma Solodo and the lawyer Olisa Agbabuka talking about the failures of leadership. I did sit down with the man who the IPOB course leader and who a lot of young Easterners are now looking to, Mr. Nnamdi Kanu, to talk to him about his feelings about Nigeria. What does Biafra mean?
It means freedom, liberty, fairness, equity, and justice.
In practical terms, these are very good sounding words, but in practical terms, what does Biafra mean?
Confederation.
So a weak center,
very weak,
very strong regions.
Absolutely.
Have you had a change of mind, therefore, about getting an independent Biafra? Because that's what I seem to be hearing.
No, I've not changed my mind, no. And independent Biafra means going back to where we were before the white man came.
Okay, so you're not talking about a federation when you say a confederation. You're not talking about a federation as part of Nigeria. You're talking about total independence.
Absolute independence.
Complete independence. Now, is there anything that can happen that will make you change your mind about this particular direction?
No.
So it is either Biafra or nothing else?
Or death, yes.
Or death?
That's correct.
If push comes to shove,
Yes.
will you go to war?
No, because truth is a far more potent and deadlier weapon than bullets and mortars.
So no war? You've ruled out the
Absolutely, I
of
don't
war.
believe in war. No, no war. When I say Biafra or death, I'll keep pushing. Either I am alive, I die in the process, I won't stop. Allow me to repeat, if you don't mind. Had sovereign national conference been convened by the powers that be, where every ethnic nation, I said every, I don't care if there are 600, I don't care. Everyone is
all the
represented.
500 plus.
Everyone together to say this is, or others can delegate, I don't know, powers to other people to attend on their behalf. Sit down to say, what type of country do we want? Sit down, discuss, agree. I can begin to perhaps submit to your position.
Is it too late?
It is way too late. They've killed too many people. They've ruined too many lives. They've wasted too many souls. How do we bring those people back?
If the federal government, given the agitation that is going on, becomes convinced that, you know what, these people have a point, it is time to actually address all these issues, and they begin to systematically address some of these issues, would you change your mind?
No, because of the deceptions of the past.
No trust?
No trust. Aburi was there, it was negotiated. Nothing happened, 1968, if I recall. And the confab report, what became of it? How about the 3 R's? Reconciliation, reconstruction, and heaven knows what else. What became of them? Nothing. Calabar Seaport is not working. Can you tell me why it's not working? It's a seaport used by the colonial masters. Why is it not working today? How about Iguacha Seaport? Why is it not being used? Why not worry? Why must we allow only Lagos to function as a viable seaport? In England, where I used to live, you had Liverpool, you had the Sun, which is Portsmouth, Southampton, everywhere. You had harbors and ports. So why must you have only one?
I've heard people say these are very valid arguments, and that these are things that are to do with bad governance. So the average Biafran, to use your phrase, or Igbo man in the Igbo, is facing poverty much in the same way that the average guy in Yobe State is facing poverty. And so these are issues of governance. You don't agree with that?
I agree completely.
Okay. So if that is it, why isn't the agitation about tackling the problem, which is ensuring good governance, perhaps starting from locally? Because part of the allegations against you is that you don't confront your political leaders in the East, and you'd like to blame Abuja for everything.
Because the way I would want to solve a problem is not how a Fulani man would want to solve it.
You really believe this is an ethnic thing, and the approach is different?
No, the approach is different. No, it's not ethnic. It is more to do with value system.
Right.
The way you may want to solve a problem could be markedly different from how I do mine.
What is the geographical makeup of Biafra, as far as you are concerned, this Biafra that you want? So, for example, if we're doing a referendum, where will that referendum take place? Is it only the 5?
It's on, no.
It's okay.
It's on, which is River State, Bayelsa, Delta, Anambra, Imo, Enugu, Ebonyi, Cross River.
Akwa Ibom?
And Akwa Ibom, of course, Akwa Ibom. Yes.
Right.
Those are the coasters. Basically,
Bayelsa?
Yes. Southeast and South-South without Edo State.
Without Edo State.
That's correct. And then including Igede, Idoma.
Right, the Benues. So the Igalas and part of the Kogi,
yes.
Kogi
Yes.
State, right?
Yeah.
Nyesom Wike, the governor of Anambra, sorry, the governor of River State, made a statement, I think it was yesterday or the day before yesterday, and said, you know, you should not be including River State.
It's for
and
the people of River State to
people.
decide, not him. I can't decide for Biafrans. They have to go and vote and convince the whole world that they want Biafra. It's not for instance, it's only one man, one vote.
What if they're not even willing to take part in the referendum? Because I've had people from the South, for example, from Biafra. I've had people from Cross River. I think there's a famous actress, Kate Henshaw, for example, wrote a long piece about why people of the South don't want to be dragged into a place called Biafra. You're saying, regardless of what they say, you want a referendum in those parts?
Because I know the majority of the people want a referendum. I was in Iguacha yesterday.
How do you know?
I was there yesterday. I was in Iguacha yesterday. You call Port Harcourt. I was there yesterday. I should have been there to see what happened.
Now,
they were delighted to see me. I'm sure you know that. It's all over the place. They're very happy to see me. I bet Kate Henshaw wouldn't get such reception. Where she to go to?
She's a big, popular Nollywood actress. I wouldn't necessarily.
I'm telling you, if I go to her village, people will turn out to see me more than turn out to see her.
I was speaking there to the head of IPOB, Nnamdi Kanu, and for details of how you can watch the full interview, you can check out my Twitter handle at Kadria Ahmed. You can also join the conversation on the channel's Twitter handle, which is @ChannelsTV. Again, my Twitter handle at Kadria Ahmed, or on Facebook at Channels Forum. The hashtag you need in order for us to be able to pick up your questions and comments and share them on this program is hashtag NGTheCore. Now, I want to come to you, Celestine, because in that interview with Mr. Kanu, he was very clear about the portions of Nigeria that he considers part of Biafra, and he talked about the South. So specifically, when it comes to this particular call for independence for Biafra that includes states and areas that cover some of the places that you come from and the people you represent, what is your reaction?
Well, I think one of the greatest problems this country have right now is that we are operating under a curse because we steal. This country steals too much. The money that is being spent in this country is stolen money. The oil that is being sold every day is stolen oil. Because in Ogoni, where I come from, our means of livelihood have been destroyed completely. We can no longer fish. We can no longer farm. We don't have good health. People can no longer go to school. Just tell me the offense that Ken Saro committed. That. Just give me a fair share of what you are taking from my land. And the man was just marching to the gallows and killed. 96 oil wells in Ogoni, 5 oil fields, nothing to show for it. Every weekend is burial. Then, now, coming to Monday, the man is crying that the Igbos are being marginalized, that they are beginning to enforce, and he want to come and steal my state. Without coming, Abiola say if you want to save a man, you bring him down and save his head. You can't save my head in my absence. Nnamdi cannot stay in Anambra or wherever you come from. To mark Ogoni is my territory. Ijo is my territory. Who told him that? So I think that he just making statements.
He did make a point, which was that if there is a referendum, it will be one man,
referendum
one
will not happen in Rivers State. I'm not the governor of Rivers State, but it will not happen.
No, but
I know that.
If we are confident about our belief that the people that he says see themselves as part of Biafra do not, why not test it with the referendum?
Well, I'm not against referendum. Me, I want restructuring. Because Rivers State, where I come from, Ogoni is the majority. We are not minority, but you won't believe that since the creation of Rivers State, no Ogoni have been governor, no Ogoni have been deputy, no Ogoni have been speaker, no Ogoni have been chief judge. We have overqualified people. So why? How?
Your commissioner for information.
So how? Why did that happen? So I need restructuring. But if it is for Biafra, referendum will not happen in Rivers State. That I'm sure.
Professor Chidi,
because I live in Port Harcourt.
I'm listening to him, and the phrase you uttered earlier just comes to mind again. A country where it's all about sharing and not productivity. It continues to be an issue, isn't it? This idea of the resources that we have, which happen to be in the Niger Delta, and everybody wanting a piece of that action, so to speak.
Frankly, if we don't rebase our political economy on productivity and not sharing, we are doomed. And we are doomed within a generation. You can see it. Why? our demographic curve far outstrips the pace of our economy to catch up. Our population is growing at about 3%, a little above that. We are still in negative economic growth territory. So we are not producing enough to be able to catch up with the number of babies we are reproducing. Okay? And so what's going to happen? At the moment, our debt burden is growing at a pace we cannot service. In less than one generation, we will not be able, there will be no schools for the kids, no hospitals for the pregnant mothers, no food to feed anybody, no salaries to pay the workers, and we have to change. There's not enough to share. So we've got to start doing production. In the political economy of the First Republic, production and competitive production was the basis. And so people could talk about the peanut pyramids and the palm oil. And indeed, when you go to the southeast of Nigeria, you still see the kids selling cashew. And you see the oil palm plantations. All that was done by who? Michael Okpara in the First Republic. You look at what happened. In 1959, Awolowo created the WNBC in Ibadan. And what was the payoff line? First in Africa. Correct? And what followed? Second to none. Eastern Nigeria Television. Now, that told you there was competition in productivity. And I think we can recreate that country in which there is pride in the person in Yobe about what they produce, and they can bring it to the country. And the person in Kebbi, and now you're seeing rice coming from Kebbi, you see the person from Lagos, you see the person from Enugu, and all of us bring something to the federation, and not this destitution of every Nigerian. And it's that destitution of all of us that brings the notion of pauperization and marginalization. We can change it. Now,
Ode, let me bring you in here, because, I mean, we can't run away from the fact that Nigeria isn't working. It really isn't. 50 years after independence, and nobody is happy. You know, there are those who are sort of shouting louder than others. We have minorities within the South-South, within the Southwest, in the North. North Central is an issue. We have Middle Belt, all of that. And we sort of have talked about, it's 50 years of independence, trying this, trying that. And Nnamdi said it's too late. And that actually maybe the solution is to allow people to just decide for themselves and move away. What do you think, given the level of failure?
Given the level of failure, we ought to return to first principles. The first principle with which we set out was that every region could take half of what it produced and hand half over to the rest of the federation to share again between themselves. But something went wrong at the point at which I ended the last narration. When Ojukwu got to Aburi, he got resource control and he got regional autonomy. But what was really required, which he did not accept, was that the old unjust system, which ensured that all the minorities in the north, in the west and in the east were not getting their due. Ojukwu did not want states created, so that all the minorities in the north, in the west and the east simply gang together and smash the Aburi Accord. When the Aburi Accord is discussed, people like to talk about what Awolowo did or did not do. No, the minorities fought for themselves by ensuring that if you were going to give regional autonomy to them in the north, the minorities will be given their due. And if you are going to do the same in the east, the minorities will be given their due. If Ojukwu had agreed, it was very difficult at that time to agree. If Ojukwu had agreed to the creation of states, and those minority elements got what they demanded, the problem would probably have been different. But when states were then created, states were created which were completely unviable, which is to say they took from them that power, those powers in the concurrent list, which they then moved almost completely to the exclusive legislative list, which made it a federal thing. Today, if we want to solve the problem, we must move from the exclusive list into the concurrent list much of what they stole.
Okay, now I want to stop you because it's important that I point out that we did invite Ohaneze to take part in this program. They apologized and said prior commitments did not allow them to send anybody, but they did say to us that they wanted us to share the summary of a communique that they issued on this particular agitation. And essentially, I'll try and run through it as quickly as possible because obviously I want to get as many people talking as possible. They said basically the Indibo are in support of a united Nigeria, peace, love, fairness, justice, equity and equality of opportunity are paramount regardless of where one comes from, that they condemn all hate speech regardless of where it comes from, and that they lend their full support to the restructuring of the Federal Republic of Nigeria on the basis of fairness and equity, and therefore call on the federal government and all leaders to commence a process of dialogue among Nigerians. They also say they support the reports of the National Conference of 2014, and that the Southeast governors and members of the National Assembly from the Southeast and the leadership of the Ohaneze in Igbo should constitute the official organs that will speak on behalf of Igbo people. We seem to have a disconnect here, Dr. Ibrahim, because again, we've got a political class, or at least a certain group of elites who seem very confident about what they're saying about their people. And yet, when I went to see Nnamdi Kanu in Umuahia last week, I saw at least 20,000 young men and women saying he's their leader. So are we deceiving ourselves when we keep insisting that it's the same set of people that should be determining the direction of Nigeria? And when I say the same sort of people, I'm talking here about political class and an elite that is doing well within Nigeria because, you know, for them, Nigeria works.
See, when you don't exercise leadership, you don't have a followership. That has been the story of Nigeria. We've had a series of leadership that have used access to power for their own personal accumulation of wealth, for their self-aggrandizement, and in the process, the people have been abandoned. And I think there's a sense in which part of the crisis we are looking at is these people, ordinary people, asking themselves, who can provide real leadership to do what the mass of the people are in dire need of? That's the type of language I understand to be happening in the country. And I think we need to put two things together. One is a crisis over political structure. And the story of restructuring in this country is very interesting. We have been restructuring since 1934, continuously. Correct. So when people say we must restructure, it doesn't make sense because we have been restructuring. The question has always been, what should be the direction of our restructuring?
Okay, and I will want us to, you know, to sort of get into that conversation about what the direction of our restructuring is. But before we do, another group of young people recently came to the fore, a coalition of young northerners asking for the Indibo to leave Nigeria by October. And we sent a colleague of ours to Kano to speak to him, Abubakar Salihu, and this is what one of the people who made that statement had to say.
We are not new in the struggle. Some of us have been in struggle for over 18 years, since the dark days of militaries. We have seen a lot, the good, the bad, the ugly side of struggle. We've been involved, but we've never been involved in any violent struggle. So the point we make is not anything to write as regards to the issue of inciting anybody to go on violent. And we caution people, and we try as much as we can to also make clarification as regards to our position. So there was nothing incitement. If there's anybody who is making an inciting statement calling for war, is the iPod, and those are the groups we are targeting to ensure that we draw the attention of Nigerians and also international community to see how they can prevail on this young man who keep advocating violence and so on and so forth for over time. Even when he was arrested, even when he was tried, even when he was granted bail, certain conditions were laid on him. He defied all of these conditions, and he's still making the same statement. As I speak to you, even yesterday, he made other statements. So if there's anybody who is looking for trouble, it should be referred to him, not us. We believe in the entity of this country, we believe in the unity of this country, and we work towards that. What we're saying is just a simple language. Somebody say, look, we're tired of this marry. We're tired of being part of this country. And we're saying, no, if you are tired, there are due processes to follow. Don't just sit down and begin to advocate for violence. There are exit ways easily for you to go without unleashing terror on innocent Nigerians, without you intimidating the unity of this country. There's an exit way. If you are truly fighting for your freedom, if you are truly fighting to go out of the country, you cannot build a nation in another nation. We believe strongly in Nigeria. You cannot continue to clamor for another country with violence in our own terrain, in our own region. We are saying, no, if you have that, please go back to your place and do it. And the saddest problem is that some of us felt a bit sliced, because when this young man was talking, provoking all the country, the leaders from Southeast, a lot of them did not come out openly to condemn the action and inaction of the young man. He kept doing. So to us, we strongly believe that, look, to avoid what happened in 1966, measures must be taken. In the past, it was war. We don't want to go into war. So the best we could do is to draw the attention of the entire country and also international community to say, look, enough of this madness of this young man.
That was Yerima Shetima. Professor Ndikalu, in 1 minute, before I go to break, did he make any sense to you?
Do you want me to be honest?
Yes.
The most fascinating thing I thought I got out of this is he's supposed to be youth and he's referring to somebody else as a young man. I think for me that sums up the entire conversation.
Okay, we are going to have to take a quick break, and when we come back we will try and open up the conversation, because we do have a fabulous group of guests in the studio. So don't go away. Stay with us. You are watching The Core. We're talking Biafra and nation building, and the program is coming to you live from Channels Television Studios in Abuja, Nigeria.
Propelling development to the highest level. In the north, there were groundnut pyramids. Ahmadu Bello University was built. Textile mills were built. In the southwest, there was cocoa. The first television station in Black Africa was built. The first stadium in Nigeria was built. Free education at all levels were launched. And some of the products have ended up in very, very high apex of the public and private sectors, professors and what have you. In the southeast, oil was a source of revenue. And Nsukka University was built. Residential hotel was built in Port Harcourt and Enugu. You know, and a robust industrial policy that produced the first steel industry in Black Africa was built. Now, I don't see how you can leave a workable system for an unworkable system. The constitutions of 1979 and 1999 were handed over by the army. It was their after-war package to be able to manage the country in a unitary form and to distribute loot of war by way of states and local government. Can you really tell me a parameter by which local governments were created in this country? Bayelsa, with its very high production of oil revenue, which is taken automatically to the distributable pool of Nigeria, has about 7 local governments. And Kano has about 50-something. And local governments are used as an index of revenue distribution. It destroys productivity for crying out loud. And I don't see any country called a federation in the world that runs a unitary system of government.
For us, restructuring means first, look at the federal-state balance. our constitution requires 2 tiers of government, recognizes 2 tiers of government, states and the federal government. Okay? We look at the balance of responsibility and power between the 2 tiers of government and ensure that what is best done at state and local levels is devolved to the states. And what is best done by the federal government stays with the federal government. Okay? That is the first step. Second step, once that is agreed, the necessary steps for constitutional amendment should kick in, because you need to amend the constitution. For instance, in our APC manifesto, we have committed to ensuring that we have state police, because we believe that a centralized police system is inappropriate for a country as large and as diverse as Nigeria.
Every building you must lay a foundation first of all before you build the superstructure. So the foundation usually is hidden, and when people are clamoring for restructure today, a lot of the emphasis today is on the superstructure. Now the truth is this: if your foundation can carry a bungalow and your superstructure is intended for a skyscraper, if you amend the superstructure, your nation will still keep having problems and ultimately collapse. So the substructure, she's mentioned the fact that some are clamoring for a return to that particular document of 2014, but some are talking about the 1963 Constitution, before the unitary one was introduced in 1966 by the military. Some are even talking about going back to the British. So we need to be very careful. If the foundations are repaired properly, everybody will see with greater clarity. And then the superstructure can then be amended easily. And more so when I'd like to mention to you that the majority of people clamoring for some of the solutions that I've mentioned so far fall into the bracket of elders. Now, we need to understand that Nigeria, we have to factor Nigeria not only about the past, but also about the future. And if we're going to do that, we're going to find out that the youths also have ideas that are being formed, but are not yet well articulated.
Welcome back. You are watching The Core, coming to you live from Channels Television Studios in Abuja, Nigeria. We are streaming this program live on Facebook, YouTube, and on Periscope. And don't forget, if you want to join the conversation, you can using the hashtag NGTheCore, and the handles are Channels TV and Kadria Ahmed. Now, in that little clip, we saw the Reverend there again making a reference to faulty foundations and putting things that foundations cannot hold, which is a point, Odia, you started with. Dr. Jibril has talked about the fact that we've had restructuring. So, I mean, in your view, is that the answer to a faulty foundation?
Yes. We do need to restructure because there was a misstructuring at the very beginning of our journey.
He said we've been restructuring
yes,
since, did you say 1934?
34, yes. We created a federal system and then destroyed it. We need to return to first principles. And there are two grounds on which we must return to those first principles. When I want to discuss with fellow Nigerians, I begin that story from Gbagi land, Gwari. And the reason is this. When Lugard wanted to create a capital for the North, he took a slice of Gbagi land and turned it into a capital. 76 years later, when the whole of Nigeria decided, no, Lagos was no longer enough, we need a new capital, they went to another part of Gbagi land and took it off. The Gbagi people are fractionized between 6 different states, local governments here and everywhere. What is wrong with having all of them who speak the same language and they are contiguous? What's wrong with having them together in one state? The fact is, the struggle for restructuring in Nigeria began with every ethnic group insisting that they want to be in a community where they can defend their language, their culture, and be able to relate to themselves in a way that is healthy before talking about how they relate to other Nigerians.
Professor Chidi, is it possible to build a nation when the foundation is ethnicity and this drive for everybody to be surrounded by people who speak his language, share their religion? In other words, can a Nigeria that everybody feels they belong to be built on that basis?
I think part of our crisis in Nigeria is that we have decided to construct a country based on a single identity narrative. And that identity is what? Ethnicity. Look at us here, we're all men. There's only there are only two women here. That's you, and there's one in the audience. But nobody is talking about gender or sex as an identity. We don't fight over that. Yes?
Some of us do.
Now, no, seriously, because part of this thing is about re-engineering the way we see ourselves, that we are more than just ethnicity. Now, take something else. Now, how many generations are represented here? You see that this conversation is taking place within a very narrow band of generation. Yes? That is, people in their 40s and 50s and 60s are the people who are in this audience.
You know, a few 30s.
It is unrepresentative. It's unrepresentative of Nigeria because life expectancy ends at the end of the 40s. And so now when you look at just these two examples, it tells you that there are lots of things that we misrepresent in focusing on this single identity narrative. And the one thing I'd like to suggest to us is Nigeria is not the most terrible ethnic map in Africa. Now, just to our eastern frontier, we have probably the most complex African country. It's called Cameroon. Cameroon has got a population of about 22 million people and over 250 ethnic and language groups. But it's also got the history of what? Anglophone, Francophone. And it's got every weather system, climatic system in Africa represented in that one little country. And it is so complex, it's highly ungovernable. And yet, they are trying, and as we speak, there is a secessionist movement in the northwest and southwest of Cameroon. So we shouldn't think that we are the worst. DRC is another country that is comprehensively ungovernable. But you know what? People are wrestling with these difficulties. The determinisms of our thinking in Nigeria have got to be brought to an end. And as a generation, the people in this room can help with doing that. We've got to believe that it is possible to re-engineer this thing if we believe.
Okay, but when we say re-engineering, what do you mean? Because in conversations I've had with people, I've not been able to get unanimity on what restructuring means. I mean, if you even listen to some of the public comments, for example, politicians from the APC say, you know, we are devolving powers, we're doing this, so it is restructuring, but we don't want to use that word because, you know, we don't really know what other people mean when they use that word. So maybe we'll start with you, Celestine, from the point of view of a minority who produces, you know, the oil that this country thrives on. You said earlier you want to see restructuring. When you say restructuring, what do you want to see?
Well, the first thing I want to see is for this country to go back to where we stopped, the principle of derivation, where the man that produced groundnut and cocoa has a lot of money to spend. I will use that to send all the Westerners to the university on scholarship, build cocoa house. The groundnut pyramid they used to send their people to the army and use the money to develop their area. Why is it that when it is oil, the narrative changed? You now bring the Land Use Act to steal by force what belonged to supposed helpless people, and that has continued. Let me just mention something. There was a memorial bus donated in the name of Kesero, and artwork, no mesh, no engine, no tire, that we were supposed to use. Platform London donated. We were supposed to use to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the murder of Kesero. It's been seized today, since 2015, by Ahmed Ali, the custom board, because he was the only military officer on the tribunal that murdered Ken. Nobody is talking. The man who was the chairman, Justice Alta, has been rewarded as the president of Court of Federal High Court. Okay. That kind of thing. It's injustice. We must go back to reverse all these things. Go to the Niger Delta where I come from. The East-West Road, should we go out to fight first before they will do so? Let's go back. Let's to that point. Let's stop. Let's go back, reverse it, scrap the Land Use Act. It's antiquated, of course. Then principle of derivation, start. We produce our oil. we sell and give money to the center, as the Awólọ́wọ̀ did.
Jibril, is that a good place to start if we're talking about restructuring, or are we going to end up with the situation where 10 years, 50 years from now, we will say what you just said, which is we've been restructuring since 1934?
You see, I listened to him very carefully. It's very interesting that all the examples he gave had nothing to do with structure. They're all about process. I'm a social scientist. In social science, we always talk of a twin. There's structure, there's process. He is talking about policy. He is talking about law. He is talking about democracy. These are issues around process. So the first point we need to clear in this country is that often when people talk about structure, they actually mean process. So there's a huge problem about terminology. The second point I want to make about structure is, let's go back to the original sin. The original sin of structure in this country, you had three regions. One of them, the north, 70% of the territory, 55% of the population in 1959 when the first election took place. That meant it was a loaded structure that gave permanent power to one group. And that is historically the basis for demand of restructuring. And then we embarked about on that journey, and from those three regions, two originally in 1934, we now have 36 and a half states, the FCT being the half states. So what does that mean in terms of where we've been headed for? Throughout that process, we were talking structure, while the real issue is that the process, the issue of democracy, the issue of the rights of the people, the issue of who exercises power, the people or a minority elite, all those issues have been neglected. And I think part of the debate is really to educate ourselves that often we have serious problems of process that we think are problems of structure.
Okay, thank you very much. Don't forget, you can watch us. We are streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope. And you can join the conversation on Twitter at Channels TV or at Gadria Ahmed. I want to start bringing in the audience. And what I'd like us to do is, if you don't mind, when you are about to speak, if you could tell us who you are, just so that our audience have a context of the place your comments are coming from. And if we could start, I think there's someone already holding a mic. Your comments about what has been discussed so far about Biafra being a metaphor for restructuring and the issues that we're trying to grapple with around what sort of restructuring we should be looking at if that is the solution.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me. I think...
your name, sir, please.
My name is Honorable Mohammed Kumalia. I was a former minority leader in the House of Representatives, 1999 to 2007. I think the first thing is that we cannot continue to live in the past. We cannot continue to canvass the mistakes or the perceived mistakes of key actors that took place maybe 50, 60 years ago as a justification for what is happening today. What do I mean? The gentleman, Mr. Odia, if I got his name correctly, kept talking about the foundation and the starting point and the mistake, during the First Republic and so on, which Professor Jibo, to my mind, has really addressed those issues. But from that time till now, hasn't there been any opportunity to get things right? And even today as we speak, we're talking about restructuring. Today it has become the most common cliche that people use just to vent their frustration. But as you rightly said, no particular person or two people could tell you the exact meaning of restructuring as far as they're concerned.
Okay. Go on, but you need to hurry because I need to get more people in. Yeah.
I want to see a lot of change in Nigeria. If you like, call it restructuring, call it whatever. But I want to see a Nigeria where the resources of the people get to the people. I want a discussion about what kind of healthcare system should Nigerians have.
Okay, and I suspect that there are people who may say to you, might be putting the cart before the horse. So I will come back to you if I can, but I want to bring a few more people in. He made a point about going to the past. And I want to ask the question of this panel and also the studio audience. Is remembering important in your view, Professor Odingalu?
Quite clearly, I think memory is significant. The question is, what do you do with memory? I like to think that there are at least three versions of the Biafra advocacy. There is Biafra as memory, honoring memory. There is Biafra as metaphor for exclusion. And there is Biafra as territory. Now, I think it's important to distinguish these three because there are three different things. And a lot of people who agree to one or the other may not agree to the other. And that is why the totalitarian, for want of a better expression, deployment of epithets, of identity as epithet is problematic for me. Oh, Igbos. Oh, Fulanis. Oh, Yorubas. I think it's very offensive. The way we refer to Ijos, Jonathan created the Ijo Mafia. You know, the way we talk about ourselves in Nigeria is terrible. And I think one of the things we can agree is we should stop referring to one another in epithets. But should we honor the memory? Yesterday, there was the launch of a book here in Abuja on General Zakaria Memalari, who was the first combatant officer in the Nigerian army, killed in January 1966. That was honorable memory. And I think we should celebrate that. Now, in that context, therefore, I am for Biafra as memory. But Biafra as territory is a different proposition. There are some people who want to argue that. And let me end on this note. People talk about restructuring. I want to put two other expressions on the table. One is citizenship and one is agency. Because now, why would somebody like Gideon Orka decide in 1990 he wants to excise some parts of Nigeria from the country? We've not put that on the table here, but I want to put that on the table. And why would somebody say leave the country, or why would somebody say leave this part? It's because we actually don't believe we are common citizens. So how do we get a common Nigerian citizenship in which all of us matter? I know more about honorable
It's a good question to throw to the audience, actually. So you're kind of doing my job. So let me ask that question. How do we get a Nigeria in which we are sort of see ourselves as common citizens?
Well, my name is Olawale Osun. I'm the chairman of Afenifere Renewal Group and the former chief whip in the House of Representatives. But I need to say this. I think if we will solve our problems, we will also have to recognize who we are. I believe that we'll be deceiving ourselves if we pretend we are just one people. Yes, we are countrymen, but the truth also is that we are a country in which there are fundamental differences in the culture, in the attitude, and in the people who inhabit it. Now, if you look at this room now, you will see all the differences. We don't have to talk about them. See what Udia is wearing as his cap. See what I'm wearing as my cap. Now, we all left at different places coming to this event. But you can see the difference, even in the attire. And I'm sure that difference would have been reflected in all that we had written today. maybe Tuoshikafa somewhere and Eba somewhere. So I'm not tribalizing. All I'm saying is that we must recognize that difference. So in building a nation, of course, Honorable Kumadia spoke about change, that he recognizes the need for a change. Now, you look at it and you say, in 1999, Obasanjo came in as a president, civilian president, succeeded by Yaradua. No? Yes, Yaradua, succeeded by Jonathan. And that is a Yoruba man, a Fulani man, and a minority man from the South. And yet, you take the World Bank governance indicators, and you assess it from 1999 to today, and you will see that other than from 1999 to 2001, if you take accountability, if you take fragility, if you take security, there has been no change. That is the World Bank, and you look at unemployment, now it's 14%. That is the official rate. We are not talking of the unofficial rate. So what I'm then saying is that if we say that things are going bad, there is this decline, and then you say there is no need to change the way we do business with ourselves, I think there's a need, and that's where restructuring comes in.
So far, I haven't heard anybody here say there's no need to change. On the contrary, everybody says. So we're trying to now determine what the change should be. Is the conversation we're having.
Dr. Jimbo spoke about structure and process. Now we can play with words. When you talk about a nation's constitution, you are talking about the structure and the processes involved.
Okay, so for you, the constitution needs to be changed.
It has to. Okay. Yes, it has to be changed.
Okay, is that a fair place to start?
That is certainly a fair place to start, because that was where the crisis was created. We had a federal system to start with, and it was forced by the first co-makers into a unitary system. Those who opposed this unitary system in a revenge coup then created a more draconian unitary system, which was not federal at all. Now we have 36 states. I can tell you, if those 36 states had 60% of what they produce as theirs, while giving 40% to the rest of the country, they would be more productive. They would design a system that will help deal with all the various aspects. In the past, local governments in Katsina, in Kano, in Ibadan, they did all the things that many state governments do today. There's no local government in Nigeria today that is allowed to operate. We need to create a proper local government system, but that means we must create proper state systems.
Okay, I have only 5 minutes before I go to break, so let me ask this quick question based on what you said. If that is the case, why is it that the allocations we now see that go to the states, because they do get allocations down to local government, how come those have not translated into the sort of development that you expect to see? And I'd like people in the audience to sort of try and grapple with that.
Say one word.
Okay.
If the federal government...
that's more than one word. Okay, quickly, because I literally have 5 minutes before I have to go.
If the federal government takes from all the states the power to command the resources and use them productively, it means that people have been deprived of their will, their capacity to dream and to make things happen.
I mean, yeah, okay, so quickly, 2 minutes.
I mean, there's so many things I disagree with. My name is Patrick Okibo, Principal Partner Next Year Advisory. There's so many things I disagree with. I don't believe that if we give more resources to the states, all of a sudden they'll become more productive. I think that the people in leadership today cannot deliver the productivity we're asking for because they lack the understanding, they don't have the competence, and there are so many things that are broken. We focus on the headline topics and we don't get deep into how it's going to get done. So if you nobody is stopping, we talk about Biafra, nobody is stopping the 5 governors of the Southeast from coming up with an economic development plan that they can drive. I don't see a federal government that has stopped them from doing that. So,
okay, let him finish. Let him finish, because
okay.
When we come back, you get a chance to talk, yeah.
I think, for me, I think that the answer here is there are certain fundamental original sins that happen that we must go back to. I disagree with him respectfully, that we must go back to talk about those because they mean something to people. Yeah? Once we've dealt with those, we now need to say as ourselves, Nigerians, what does it mean to be a Nigerian? And what kind of Nigeria do we want to see? We must have that conversation. If we don't have the conversation, the constitution that says we the people is a lie, because we never agreed to that. It's when we come together and have some detailed discussions about who we want to be, how we want to operate, what Nigeria is, what Nigeria owes me, and what I owe Nigeria, then we can begin to forge a country that works for everybody. But right now, Chido Onuma is right. We are all Biafrans. The ones in the southeast, the ones in the northeast, they're all Biafrans. Nigeria has failed everyone. We must go back to the basics, first principles, and decide what we want to see as a Nigeria that works.
Thank you very much. And we will come back and discuss what we think those first principles are after the break. You are watching a conversation. Okay, just let me quickly get you to talk about what is your first principle?
Well, my first principle is we go back to where the principle of derivations stopped.
So it's all about derivation for you.
Yes, let's keep giving back to those that produce. I mean, they should have. I mean, how do you feel that somebody in Ogali cannot drink water, somebody in Ogoni cannot farm, and yet see what oil money has done in Abuja that does not have one oil well? How do you feel? I mean, that is injustice. This country will continue to operate under a curse until you return back. You think that another data people are praying for Nigeria? No, they are cursing them every day. You think Ken Sarua was singing for this country when they were killing him? No, he cursed them. So we must keep back. We must have a human heart. We must have Mek in us. I don't have anything to do. Nobody, I mean, just go back to the data. I flew with Amina Mohammed across the Niger Delta and was weeping when I got home. There is just nothing there. Should we beg Nigeria to even construct East-West Road? Should we beg them? Our money? I spent 6 hours to, from Bori to Port Harcourt. It's 45 minutes. I spent 6 hours. I mean, it's not done. We must do the right things to get out of the course and move on.
Okay, we are going to take a quick break. Stay with us. Don't go away.
I functioned for years as a state official. I was Attorney General in Lagos. And we did a lot of work in terms of litigation, in trying to find autonomy for the states. So by and large, I mean, for example, look at the whole, what they call fiscal restructuring. We said that a state government should be able to keep as much of what it makes as possible. The problem we've always had is not so much the restructuring. It is more the fact that there is oil, there is money to be shared. When there was oil and plenty of it, we went to court, and I'll give you an example. We went to court saying, let's have fiscal autonomy. Let every state keep its money. This was a so-called resource control case and all of that. Several states refused to back Lagos State's call at that time. In fact, practically every state, except 4 states, agreed that there should be fiscal restructuring. Everybody else disagreed, said no. We said, okay, VAT. We also went to court on VAT. We said, hey, look, let everyone keep the VAT. It was widely opposed by most states. So you see, even this call for restructuring, sometimes, you find that there's very little sincerity around it. Even a lot of the senators that are talking about restructuring and all of that. I mean, the question is, when the rubber really hits the road, how many people are really going to be able to stand up and say, let's have complete autonomy of the states? I am one for saying that as much as possible, states should have autonomy in the sense that they should at least provide their own income. make their own money. Every state at the moment is perfectly entitled to do so. Say, for example, a state decided to go into manufacturing today, or a state decided to go into agriculture in the way that some states have done. An agribusiness, huge potential. You can employ so many people, and states keep personal income tax. If you produce more VAT, you get a better share of VAT. You know, so there's a lot that states can do at the moment. Unfortunately, we've all sort of like grown up on this oil every month. We share some money and all of that. Now that that is thinning out, I don't even think you need to tell anyone about trying to make more money. I think everyone is now sitting down in the various state houses across Nigeria, thinking how we're going to make a bit more money to be able to fulfill our promises to the people.
Restructuring means different things to different people. You don't sit on a table. You need to, first of all, establish, a common basis, understanding what is it we are going to restructure, and how do you proceed in doing that. Maybe the certain agitations to do with certain forms of restructuring, by the time Nigerians are able to sit down together, they may find out that no, maybe that is not what is required now. Maybe these particular things, set of things are the kind of restructuring that are required. But leaders should not assume that they know it all and decide for people what kind of restructuring the people require. It's important, we listen to the people, we sit down with them, and so that we establish a common basis of the kind of restructuring that Nigeria requires at this time, and the time frame for the implementation of whatever we may agree to, and Nigeria will be better off rather than saying no, yes, no, no, yes will not take us anywhere.
Welcome back. You are watching The Core, coming to you live from Channels Television Studios in Abuja, Nigeria. And we're talking about Biafra and whether it is a metaphor for restructuring. Now, during the break, we saw the acting president, Professor Oshibanjo, there talking about his efforts in as Attorney General in Lagos State to push the agenda for restructuring. We also saw Senator McAfee talking about the reasons why we need to restructure in this country. And in the studio, we were indeed trying to grapple with what restructuring actually means. And we ended with Celestine, who represents the Ogoni people, who are a minority in the South. And I'd like to go to someone who represents, I guess, the minority in the North, who sometimes don't get a look in. What is your view regarding all the agitation that is going on? And please, if you could tell us who you are and the area you come from as you answer that.
I'm Solomon Iwuga. I used to be Deputy Governor of Nasarawa State. I was a minister in FCT before I became senator. That's the privilege Nigeria gave me. I was born in Lagos, but I come from Nasarawa State. My father-in-law was the first Secretary General of the United Middle Belt Congress, late Patrick Doherty. And his own position, which some of us was the fact that they wanted a Middle Belt region, not exclusive of the North. He had a brilliant relationship with the late Sardauna. They never disagreed personally, but they disagreed on principle. As long as the Northern Middle Belt Congress was not created, a Middle Belt region was not created, he disagreed. He was offered parliamentary secretary a couple of times, but he stuck to his principle. So what am I saying? Whatever Nigeria restructured that does not capture the essence of people's living, there's a deformity. And this deformity affects us in various ways. I always, being a student of contemporary politics, gives me room to draw from the qualities other people did. Even the German Federation was unitary in terms of people. They decided to create what they call, from a Gemeinschaft, they defined a society in terms of community. Thank you. The community associated through a Gesellschaft to create the nation. That is the way they defined their country. How do we define our country? Thank you. In terms of the way we live and orient our thinking towards Nigeria. My professor in political science in UI, Professor Dudley, wrote a book, The Politics and Instability in Northern Nigeria, where he used it to define the politics of Nigeria. And interestingly, all politics that started in the first generation started in Jos because of the cosmopolitan nature. When I was a student, we went to do a research in Ibadan. And the question was, who are you? Are you a Nigerian or a Yoruba? First. The Yorubas felt they were pure Yorubas, but they thought that the quality of Nigeria made them better people. That was our finding when we went to local communities. So I want to reason like the Yoruba man I met in UI in the 70s, that he is a Yoruba man belonging to Nigeria. That is the way we reason when we are in, we believe we are minorities,
okay,
but we are not taken along in the larger configuration of what Nigeria presents as qualitative population. That is our general belief.
Okay, and I think by and large, and I'd like the mic to move along while I'm asking this next question. No, this way, please. This way. That way, yes. Thank you. I think we can reach a consensus that, not by design, but somehow we've ended up with people in this audience for whom I think we can say generally Nigeria has worked for. You know, we've sort of been, you know, beneficiaries of this place called Nigeria. But the question is, again, in trying to put together a place that has political stability and where economically it works for everybody, you know, the elites, the minorities, the ones that are not minorities, everybody. We have to go back to that first question. First, how do you build that national identity? And second, what do you do in terms of if you're restructuring, where do you start? So real practical questions.
My name is Sam Omashaye. I'm a columnist with the Nation newspaper. I just want to take us back in history, and I align with Odia Ofemi what he has said, because without memory we are nothing. I mean, if we don't remember where we came from before we go to this studio, we won't know where to proceed when we leave. It is that important. I want to go back to the narrative that has been left out. That is the importance of the center. We forget that before the Civil War, the Southeast was dominant in the central government in terms of the parastatals and all of that. We tend to forget that when Chief Obafemi Awolowo was done as premier in the Western region, he decided it was time to go to the center. Why was the center that lucrative? Why was the center a place that belonged to all at that time? And why is it now that nobody wants the center except those who are benefiting from the center? We have to understand that we have experienced a somersault of our federation before our own eyes. And it is because we have not addressed the fact that it is the problem that the Northwest has created in the center, fostered by the military when they were in power. And I go back to, just a second, I go back to the question of oil. You know that in 1959, there was this Raymond Commission that said that, okay, let us give them 50% of oil because of mineral resources. Everybody should take care of the mineral resources because oil at that time had not become dominant. Immediately, oil became dominant and the military oligarchy took over. It became 1.5% up to the time of Shagari.
Okay, I need to stop you there. Professor Odika, let me come back to you. He's talking there about a narrative that puts the problem squarely on a particular region, the Northwest, he said, and the problem that they've caused, and the lack of attraction, he says, for the center, for everybody, except them, is what he seems to imply. Is that narrative accurate in your view? And will it allow us to arrive, because if you don't analyze it well, people will say you can't get to the right solution. Does that ring true?
I still come back to this issue of a single identity narrative. Northwest. Northwest is another way of saying Fulani, in the Nigerian epithets of these things, yes? And the fact of the matter is, God bless his soul, Thomas Aninkano was buried yesterday. He has more in common with the boy is good, Mbazilika Amechi, in Enugu, than he has with the Almajiri in Kano. And so we create these identity boxes. The reality is that I've got more in common with Mohammed Kumalia than he has with the Almajiri in Meduguri, or that I have with the IPOB advocate in Aba. Reality. So the way Nigeria is, we are misaligned in between our reality and the way we communicate our identities. And for me, I hear all the talk about restructuring, but the biggest issue in my life, my own biggest agenda, is an end to militarism. Because the reason we are all complaining about structure is that none of us had a part in creating the structure we had here. The biggest agent, so the agency issue is the biggest issue for me. The biggest agent in this structure is the military. President Buhari is a military man. He's not a civilian, I'm not mistaken about that. Obasanjo, military. The first thing we have got to do is take paternalism of military rule out of Nigeria. Let citizens get together and fix our country.
How? In practical terms. In practical terms. What do we
don't
need to
vote
do?
for any more soldier in our country. Very simple. We will not vote for any other soldier, no matter how the person is marketed. Let citizens trust one another. That for me is the first thing.
Okay, but if, for example, you're a young man sitting in, let's say, Aba,
yes,
and you're not working, and you're feeling disenfranchised, and you're tired, and you're saying, Biafra represents hope for me, and maybe within that particular geographical entity, I might become something. If you tell me when 2019 comes, do not vote for a military man, vote for a civilian, and that's the end of your problem, I may not be convinced.
No, you don't have to be. Now, what is the issue?
So the question I'm asking is, because there are real issues,
why
everyday
are people
issues
disengaged from Nigeria?
that are confronting, everyday Nigerians is the issue I'm asking. So Mr. Kumalia made a reference to the fact that, a Nigeria, for example, that provides practical things like healthcare, employment, security, because, all over the country there are theaters of conflict. So in practical terms, how do we begin to address these problems while also putting together a structure that provides political stability and economic prosperity for the majority of our people?
Why is it that we've got the army deployed in 28 states out of 36?
That's the question.
Why is it the Nigerian police force doesn't work? Under whom was the police force destroyed? Now, when you look at the details of where we are, it comes down to militarism. The fact that that the leadership, and that's why, Nigerians talk to one another with immediate effect. And right now, the way we discuss one another, the aggression, the ordering of our neural wiring is very military. And we've got to end it. That, for me, is the biggest thing. Different people will disagree. But the reality is that the reason Nigeria is stuck in the rut that it is because the military has rewired our country. If we don't end it, we are not going to make any progress with restructuring.
Okay, I have very little time before the program is ending, and I'd want to come back to the panel. So I'd like to take a few more people in the audience very quickly, a minute each. The lady, then the gentleman in the purple tie, then the gentleman in black. Where is the microphone, please? And then we'll come back to so about 4 people, 5, and then quickly, maybe a minute and a half each, please, because time is gone, yeah? Okay.
My name is Rose Benokabwe. I'm from Anambra State, and I'm a management consultant. We've talked a lot about restructuring, and one thing that keeps coming up is bad leadership, and the truth is the two are related. And you cannot solve one without the other. Restructuring is all well and good. Like somebody said, we've been restructuring forever. And we can continue restructuring from now till thy kingdom come if we do not solve the real problem, which is bad leadership. Restructuring will not help the country. It will never help the country.
And so in a sentence, how do we solve the leadership problem?
How do we do that? We have to change the way the leaders emerge. We have to start from the beginning and change the way we get these leaders. And it's not just military, because some of them are not military, but they're just ignorant.
Okay, so party politics. And
so we need to educate the public. We need to actually educate the public. When somebody comes to you and gives you a bag of rice, that does not make the person a good leader. When somebody has led you for 4 years and done absolutely nothing, and at the end of that 4 years they give you a bag of rice, that person is not a good leader, and you will suffer for the next 4 years.
So if you don't have rice at home and your children are dying of hunger,
take the rice, but don't vote for them.
Okay, let's move to the next person, please. Yes, so to tell us who you are quickly.
Good evening. My name is Chata Wanza. I work with SBM Intelligence. I have a question for all 4 panelists, and it's as a result of this. We all agree that there's a need for some restructuring, but we have short-term problems, medium-term problems, and long-term problems. Please, all of you, in your words, because when I see 20,000 people outside Nnamdi Kanu's house, it's a cry for help I see. When I see thousands of youths milling around doing nothing on Nigeria Road in Kano, it's a cry for help. So how will you solve in the short term this big problem of unemployment for youth, which is fueling all of the security problems in the country and giving people, unsavory characters a voice?
Okay, and you will answer it as you're rounding up. So, yeah, hold on to that question in your mind. Yes, the gentleman in the purple tie.
My comments, well, my name is Stanley Bento. I'm a radio presenter, and by nature of my job is to listen to people. So I listen to and get responses from them. And one of the things that I've observed that I think that is a little bit lacking in a lot of our conversations is the how to address fear, because that is what I hear and perceive. There's fear of domination. And if you listen to conversations across board, this fear comes across. So we talk about restructuring very often, but the challenge is that whenever I'm with a guest and I ask them a question, how do we do this? The answer is always, we need it, we need it, we need it. But when you come to the laws and principles of conflict resolution, you will not achieve anything simply because you need it. You achieve it because you have addressed the fears of your adversary.
Okay, then I'm going to have told you that there's a gentleman in white in the middle here. Microphone, please. I literally have 2 minutes to come back to the panel and close this show, so we have to hurry. Okay.
My name is Abdulrazak Bello Barkindo. I'm the spokesman for the Nigerian Governors Forum, and I hope nobody says, aha, here they come. I'm very happy that everybody here agrees that Nigeria is indivisible, should remain together, only that the method in which Nigeria is run is wrong. Some of the takeaways here are very interesting. Of course, we have to change the way that leaders emerge in this country. If we talk about crap leadership, what about crap followership? There is serious crap followership in this country, because the issue of rice wouldn't arise if we had a good followership in this country that understands who should go to the House of Representatives, who should become a governor.
So you're blaming Nigerians and not your bosses.
Wait a minute.
Not
I'm
your
saying
bosses.
everybody has a role to play in the emergence of a good Nigeria. Because a good Nigeria will not just emerge if only leaders are blamed. The followership must be educated as to who they want to vote for.
Okay, the gentleman in the striped shirt right there. I literally got to come back to this panel very quickly.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Nyanso Ekanem. I work for Wear Capacity Limited, an infrastructure firm. First, I will be described as one of those you call professionals. And it's interesting that professionals are now coming to the table to discuss Nigeria. Because at some point we've left that and said, okay, let's leave it to the politicians. But the truth is, a couple of years back, I'll be watching this on TV, then we'll debate at the office or at our homes. But I think professionals, in quote, should start discussing Nigeria and getting involved and very active in politics, get voted for or vote. Secondly, representation. We've allowed representation to define who governs us. So if someone is appointed a minister, we all go to him because we are looking for dividends of democracy from that minister. Someone was appointed NFF, Nigeria Football Association, chairman, and there was a big party in his village. They had his picture on their T-shirts and wrappers because they want something from him. But unfortunately, that's not how Nigeria should be run. Okay. But thirdly, please, the last one.
No. Seriously, I have to come back to my panel.
Thank you very much.
So I can't. This is the last gentleman in green, and then we're coming back. Okay, quickly, really quickly.
Well, I think just to throw a pose.
Who are you, please?
Sam Amada,
okay, sit down, sir. Sit down, sir.
I think Chidi and I would like to resolve this conflict between Chidi and Odia. Primarily, the idea of an ethnic state or ethnic enclave. You talk about Germany. Those communities were not ethnically defined. They were communities. So we can decentralize, build governance from bottom line, but should it be an ethnic identity? I think the problem with structuring is the sense of a unitary identity. So should it be ethnic, or should we all have citizens, democratic citizenship, so that we define people by belonging to a community in an accessible, universal form?
So the identity question. Yes, sir. Finally, the final comment.
Thank you very much. My name is Chris Kwaja with the Center for Peace and Security Studies, Modibarma University of Technology in Yola. I think my point has to do with the kind of institutions that have emerged over time. I remember in 2010, Obama made this statement about the tension between strong leaders and weak institutions in Africa. And I think that is, for me, is very crucial to what we are discussing. If you are talking about restructuring, restructuring must be something that should respond to the kind of institutions we have. Because the leaders that have driven these institutions have been responsible for the kind of bastardization we've been talking
so
about.
how do you restructure to take into account the fact that we have weak institutions in Nigeria? Quickly, please.
Leadership, very fundamental. And the leadership we are talking about is not one where the process is militarized.
Okay, he said that, so I have to stop.
I differ a bit with his own.
Unfortunately, I don't have the time. You don't understand. There's a lot of... Prof, last person, and then we will come to this way to close the program.
My name is Anthony Killer. I'm the Center Director for the Center for International Advanced and Professional Studies in Lagos. I think whatever we want to do, one of the things we have to shift away from the Nigerian system is our allergy for truth and objectivity. We have created a nation based on lies. We have forced people to hate their tribes to become Nigeria, and it doesn't work. And I'll say one thing, last thing. We're having this discussion, bad as Nnamdi Kanu is. Without Nnamdi Kanu, we won't be having the discussion we're having tonight.
Thank you very much. I've got 4 minutes, so 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute to round up, starting with you, Dr. Ibrahim.
The people of this country believe in and want to engage in democratic processes. Our leaders are very skilled in dismantling the democracy that exists in our constitution. Moving forward, process is very important. Deepening democracy is central to the recovery of a sense of belonging, but above all, to running governance in the interest of the people of this country.
Mr. Ofemu?
We must do what the Indians did. They created proper cultural geographies, and what our own Awolowo told us to do is crisscross those cultural geographies with a common morality, a common welfare policy, so that irrespective of where you live, irrespective of the ethnic group you belong to in Nigeria, no matter where you move to, you will get education for your children, employment, and old age pensions. It is possible. We have the means to do it. And I think we should stop pretending that you will not restructure. We will restructure.
Chris?
Yeah, moving forward, I think that we need to fight corruption, because nothing will work except that is done. Who are those important generators that will not allow the factories to run? Why is it that a Dangote that has so much money will enjoy waiver and the common man in Aba cannot get waiver? How come that we will submit budget in September and it will be passed in July? We must unmax those behind these sort of things. Small, less than 0.5% running down this country, we should unmax them and expose them, and we'll move on.
Professor Odinkalu.
Cheta asked a question, short, medium, long term, what we can do. I tend to agree with him that we've got a problem with with jobs and skills, and that's driving a lot. And in my, I agree with much of what's been said here politically. I'll just list 3 things. First of all, I think we should remove labor from the exclusive legislative list. I don't think it is right to insist that everybody earns the same thing in Yobe, in Imo, and in Lagos, irrespective of productivity. That's number 1. That will mean we can free up money to create more jobs. Number 2, and that indeed is also restructuring. Number 2, I think we need to, the body language has got to change. We should not have waited 2 years to have an economic recovery and growth strategy. We should have had a president on the first day of the tenure going to the National Assembly, addressing National Assembly and declaring a state of economic emergency and rallying the country behind him. And finally, jobs and labor should be in the National Defense and Security Council, because that is our biggest single national security problem.
Thank you very much to my panel. You have been watching The Core, and we were discussing Biafra and whether it was a metaphor for restructuring. My panel, Professor Odinkalu, Celestine, Mr. Ofemun, and Dr. Ibrahim, thank you so much. My distinguished studio audience, I know many of you were not very happy at the time you had to speak. I do apologize. Unfortunately, there is not much we can do. Thank you so much. And you can carry on the conversation on Twitter and also on our Facebook and all the other platforms that we have for the social conversation. Join us again next month, when we will have another edition of The Core. On behalf of Ford Foundation,